Hi everybody, this is SAAD. Some of you may remember an anecdote that I shared a while ago regarding an invited lecture that I had delivered at Wellesley College back in 2014, specifically on campus lunacy and associated topics. At the end of that lecture, one student had engaged me, and she was insistent and adamant that it was a good idea for professors to be polling their students at the start of class about their preferred gender pronouns. And of course, I insisted to her that this was a bad idea. I then appeared in front of the Canadian Senate several years later to reaffirm that this was a bad idea. Well, stay tuned for an update on the gender pronoun issue. Forget everything you think you know about mobile games, because one of the most ambitious RPG projects of 2019 has just been released, and it's going to change everything. Introducing the sponsor of the video, Raid Shadow Legends. The game is totally free. It has all the features you'd expect from a brand new RPG title. Amazing storyline, awesome 3D graphics, giant boss fights, PvP battles, and hundreds of champions to collect and customize. Look how crazy the level of detail is on these champions. Raid is getting big real fast, so get in early. Starting now will give you a huge head start. There's also an upcoming special launch tournament with crazy prizes. So go to the description of this video now and download Raid only through my link to get 50,000 silver immediately and a free epic champion, part of the new player program courtesy of the dev team. Some of you might remember that during my testimony in 2017 in front of the Canadian Senate, some of the so-called progressive and liberal senators were scoffing and mocking me with derision regarding some of my dire warnings and some of my concerns about Bill C-16, the transgender bill. And of course, my position was not in any way that we shouldn't have every possible legal mechanisms to protect the rights of transgender people as we would the rights of anybody else. And of course, I'm all for everybody living free of bigotry and hatred and discrimination, but that some of the broad ways by which the bill was written could lend itself to downstream effects that could be problematic. One of which would have been the manner by which I teach my courses in evolutionary psychology. It is perfectly conceivable that someone could come along and say, but wait a second, you're always talking about sex differences as though the world is made up of antiquated binary thinking, male-female, and you are being transphobic and not recognizing the 873 genders that are naturally occurring. This wasn't hyperbolic on my part, and of course, I've only been proven right since then. And as an additional proof of how veridical my position was, notwithstanding the scoffing and mocking Canadian senators, I'm going to read you fully an article written in Scientific American. So this is a very prestigious venue, written by Abigail Segai and Juliet A. Williams, both of whom are professors of sociology and gender studies, of course they are, respectively at the University of California, Los Angeles. They are writing a book about use of the concept of gender neutrality in the law, news media, and political activism. So let me read you their article, and I will pepper it with some of my commentary. So the article's title is Why We Should All Use They, Them Pronouns. Okay? Using gendered identifiers, even if we get to choose our own, can reinforce bias and discrimination. So they're taking it much further now. They're not simply saying that we should be, polling people about what their preferred gender pronouns are and so on. We should get rid of that exercise, and we should all have just one gender-neutral pronoun. So here we go. This week, tech developers introduced Q, the first genderless virtual assistant. Whereas Siri, Alexa, and most other electronic helpers speak in conspicuously feminine tones, Q has been engineered to create a gender-neutral effect. It's really good that people are focusing on important problems like the gender neutrality, the vocal gender neutrality of a computer helper. As a result, users can benefit from all the useful information and guidance available to us today without reinforcing the old-fashioned idea that the role of eager helpmate is necessarily played by a woman. Now, had the voice been that of a man, the exact same professors would have said, oh, look, they're using men because men know things, and this is why the helper is a male. You are arguing that women are not good enough to be helpers. Only men could offer advice. So had they chosen a male voice, the patriarchy is evil. When they choose a female voice, the patriarchy is evil. Remember, all roads lead to bigotry. But degendering is not just good for robots. It's time we humans get serious about it too. We need to degender humanity, because humans are not a sexually reproducing species made up of two fundamental phenotypes. Not true. That's antiquated biological thinking. There are signs we're moving in that direction already, thank Darwin. Some people and even companies are pushing back against everyday practices that automatically place us into binary gender categories. Oh, the horror. Just this week, for example, United Airlines announced that it would create a new booking option for people who do not identify as Mr. or Ms. They can now choose the gender-neutral honorific MIX, MX. I don't know how you pronounce that. MIX. Among lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer plus, LGBTQ plus advocates and other progressives, using people's preferred or affirming pronouns, including the gender-neutral singular they, is already an important and widespread way to show respect and promote inclusion. Across college campuses and a growing number of professional workplaces, it is now common to begin meetings by having people introduce themselves and state their pronouns. So remember, the issue that student and I were addressing back in 2014, that issue that seemed so unlikely to occur, is now becoming standard practice. So expect productivity in the West to go down as we spend 90% of our days introducing ourselves using our preferred gender pronouns. Pronoun preferences are showing up on email signatures too. All right. For several months, we have been traveling across the country to interview feminists and LGBTQ plus activists, and we have found that they generally support the idea of announcing pronouns on email signatures and in introductions. They say these practices create spaces that are welcoming of transgender and gender nonconforming people. Reverend Neil Cazares Thomas, pastor of the Cathedral of Hope in Dallas, the world's largest liberal Christian church with a primary outreach to LGBTQ plus people, told us that including pronouns on an email signature serves as, quote, code for transgender folks that they are going to be welcome in this space, close quote. All right. These new practices challenge assumptions that gender identity is always self-evident and that everyone identifies as either man or woman. Well, more than 99% of people do. But they leave intact the presumption that gender identity is relevant in all social interactions. Indeed, having to constantly announce one's pronouns or choose an honorific may make gender seem even more important than it already is. That's a problem, because studies show that highlighting gender often disadvantages women. For instance, when identical resumes are submitted for a position with the only difference being gendered first names of applicants, quote, Brian is twice as likely as, quote, Karen to get the offer. In contrast, when symphony orchestras adopt blind auditions that use a screen to conceal the candidate's identity from the jury, the probability of women being advanced and hired increased dramatically. So look what they're saying here. It's not just gender pronouns that are problematic. Even your first name, to the extent that it is gendered, right? I mean, sometimes you say Chris could be male or female, but Brian is male, Karen is female. That already introduces bias. So we should probably just call people according to some sort of technical Android number. So for example, I am Android X7J4GL. That removes my gendered name. Gad is a male name, and that might cause bias. This is why I now prefer to go by Android XJ7L2X LGB. Announcing pronouns or having to choose an honorific among gendered options may also worsen gender inequality by making women more aware of their own gender identity. I mean, imagine having women be aware that they are women. Could you imagine how horrific that would be? One study found that Asian American women college students perform worse on a math test when asked to identify their gender, stereotypically associated with low performance in math before taking the exam. Studies like this lead us to wonder whether constantly having to declare that your gender pronouns are he, she, hers, or that your honorific is Ms. could lead people who use these pronouns to underperform on tasks typically associated with masculinity or to opt out of these tasks altogether. There you go. The reason why some women don't perform well in, say, differential equations course or advanced calculus or analysis of algorithms or formal languages, my undergrad is in mathematics and computer science, is because they've had to think about being women, and then that makes them perform worse in differential equations. If we removed all markers of our maleness and femaleness, remove that my name is Gad, remove that I'm a he, remove my outlandish masculinity, perhaps by placing me under a burqa. Everybody should be under a burqa. Then you could only judge people based on the content of their character. Remove visible markers of your humanity because for peace. Given how pervasively women are subordinated by gender stereotypes, it is not surprising that many seek gender anonymity in online chat rooms and in other virtual spaces. Well, some women refrain from identifying who they are in online chat rooms because they're trying to curtail the possibility of someone sending them dick pics. Not only do these spaces allow us to escape judgments based on gender, but they free us from the obligation to be gendered in the first place. Get rid of genders. Create a gender-neutral society. Remember when I satirized all this? Sometimes a person just wants to be a doctor or a firefighter, not a woman doctor or a female firefighter. I don't want to be known as a human evolutionary behavioral scientist. I want to be known as a non-arboreal, multicellular organism. What if there were a way to promote gender inclusion as announcing pronouns and adding MX as an option to airline reservations seek to do, without running the risk of worsening gender inequality? So here comes the great proposal. We think there is, using they, them for everyone, regardless of gender identity. So please pause here and think what they're saying. It's no longer about all of us being polled 93 times a day about what our gender pronouns are. We can get rid of all that simply by making everybody refer to themselves as they and them. What a wonderful society. Definitely does not sound like an Orwellian, totalitarian, fascist dystopia. We could similarly make MX the salutation for everyone, or simply do away with salutations altogether. Get rid of salutations altogether. This is why I believe in the Mengele school of neurology. If you behead people, they could never get brain cancer. So one of the best ways to get rid of brain cancer is to behead people as a preemptive policy. It's preventive medicine, really. Beheadings are preventive medicine. So if we get rid of salutations, if we get rid of our humanity, if we get rid of our biological markers, if we all are cloaked under burqas, that's when we will have true freedom. This is not satire. I'm reading this in Scientific American. The universal singular they is inclusive of people who identify as male, female, or non-binary. Example, Drew is in my class. They are a great student. It avoids the problem of misgendering by not using pronouns to gender people in the first place. Plus, it reduces the salience of gender in everyday interactions, which is likely to be a good thing for women, regardless of whether or not their assigned sex at birth was female. To be sure, for people who have experienced the pain of being denied gender recognition in the past, announcing pronouns can lead to meaningful moments of affirmation. But this may come at a hidden cost to others. Some people feel that announcing gender, writes historian Jen Mannion of Amherst College, quote, requires them to make a declaration whether they are ready or want to, close quote. And we argue announcing pronouns may enable gender bias and discrimination. Likewise, while the use of honorifics is commonly viewed as a sign of respect, as long as the two most used options are gender specific, use of honorifics emphasizes gender and potentially perpetuates bias and discrimination, problems we cannot afford to disregard. When a society becomes so plush that it looks for imaginary problems, that's when you know the beginning of the end is close by. When we propose to activists the idea of replacing gender pronouns with this universal singular they, most dismiss such broad-based language reform as pie-in-the-sky thinking. Yet, who would have thought that use of the honorific Ms., coined in the 1970s as an alternative to Miss or Mrs., would have caught on as it has? Unlike the campaign for Ms., everyone uses the word they already. In fact, lots of people use the singular they when they don't know a person's gender identity, as in, quote, that driver just cut me off. They're such a jerk, close quote. Don't get us wrong, we are all for gender inclusivity, a world in which users can choose between a masculine and a feminine sounding Siri is a real improvement over one in which all virtual assistants are only women-like. But let's not stop there. With advances like Q, we have the chance to move beyond the practice of gratuitous gendering. And that's an opportunity we need to embrace in other aspects of life as well. This is in Scientific American. Some people are waking up today and working on quantum computing. Other people are working in the neurosciences and psychology and economics and consumer behavior, studying the dead language of Sanskrit. These people are trying to argue that all people should now be referred to using the pronoun they or them because gender non-binary people. So this is what I referred to in my Canadian Senate testimony as the tyranny of the minority. Because an extraordinarily few number of people don't identify as either male or female, humanity will remove a biological marker that defines their personhood, whether they are male or female. So let me here not use they or them. I, Dr. Gadsad, male, am married to a biological female, a cis-normative biological female. I refer to her as she, and I also have 2 children, a male and a female. Take care, everybody.